بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم آمين وبعد. We continue with Kitab al-Sawm inshallah, and we hope to conclude tomorrow night. We covered, some of the ahkam pertaining to the sighting of the hilal, the moon, and we said that, the author, he gives some ahkam about whose testimony do we accept for the sighting of the new moon, and, when are you obligated to follow somebody's testimony. And I kind of gave a summary on kind of contemporary scholars, how they've applied that. And so, the opinions are: one, you follow your local sighting. And so this is a classical traditional opinion, is that you follow your local sighting. And how you define that is there's a way today is defined by political governments. So every government cites for their region or their country. And then another opinion is that you follow global sighting. Any Muslim that sights it in the world is sufficient, and if it's a reliable, trustworthy Muslim, we accept their sighting. And this is the opinion that many of the fiqh councils are accepting and adopting. And so the second opinion we said is that you follow global sighting, and that the sighting of any Muslim that is trustworthy, that's not a fasiq and is trustworthy, is acceptable. And this is what a lot of fiqh councils are following. There's a condition that many of them add. They say that as long as there is an astronomical probability of sighting it. And so we said a few years back there was a sighting in some parts of Africa, but majority of the world didn't accept it because they said that the astronomical probability of seeing it is very low. Before that, I think there was a sighting in Yemen, and there was the same debate: do we accept it or do we not? And so there's this issue of astronomical probability in accepting it. Something that no scholar says is we follow Saudiya. There's no such thing in fiqh that we follow Saudiya, we follow the Haramain when it comes to the sighting of the moon. It has nothing to do with them. This is a matter of sighting the hilal. And so if a person follows local sighting, you follow local sighting. If you follow global sighting, it doesn't matter who sees it. It can be somebody in Europe, it can be somebody in Africa, it can be somebody in Asia or South America, any part of the world. If a Muslim sees it, you accept it. It's sufficient. But some Muslims, they're very picky. If Saudiya sees it, we accept it. If it's another country, not Saudiya, it's some other part, Mauritania or Kenya or Yemen or some other nation, we don't accept it. That distinguishing between nations, that doesn't exist in Sharia. No ahka ulama say that. Yes, Haji.
Example is Egypt recite the moon.
Yeah.
Saudi accept it.
They won't accept it.
Why who accept it?
Because for them it's political. It's political. They don't accept it for political reasons. It's about establishing their authority as a nation. So every nation wants to have their own sighting. They don't accept each other's sighting. So that's why this whole issue of nation state, it makes this mas'ala a bit more complicated.
The United States has 50 states.
Yeah.
All these states don't recite moon.
Yeah.
Why do we follow someone else?
If all these states don't recite the moon,
50 states of United States recite this one, don't find it.
yeah.
So why who accept it?
Because so the argument is, if the Hajj is asking, do nations accept the sighting of other nations? And the ruling is no. Is it for an Islamic reason? No. It's for a political reason. Traditionally, the ummah was one ummah. It's one government. So you don't distinguish between the lands, right? And then colonialism came, and then they divided the world into nation states. That's a Western European idea. They separated the ummah, broke them into nation states, set up these borders, passports, all of this. It's a European system that they enforce on the rest of the world. So before that, the ummah was one nation. The way they divided it was that locations would sight for each other. Each region would have their own sighting. Medina would have their own sighting. Mecca would have their own sighting. Syria would have their own sighting. So on and so forth. That's how it was. And then with the advancement of the world, you had nation states. And then what happened now is nation states are sighting for their entire nation for political reasons. not for Islamic reasons, for political reasons. This European nation-state system they've adopted, that is how they're operating. It isn't an Islamic thing. And so the question comes, so should we accept the siding of the world? Right? And there's an opinion of our scholars that says, you can accept the siding of any Muslim in any part of the world if it has been conveyed to you through a reliable source, you can take it. So, majority of scholars today, they're adopting that. They're saying if any Muslim sees it, it doesn't matter where. In the United States, Europe, Africa, any part of the world, you accept it. If a Muslim sees it, it's trustworthy, they're trustworthy, you adopt that siding. So that is what the contemporary scholars are following in Western nations. The issue with Eastern nations or Muslim nations, they're not adopting that for political reasons. Does that make sense? They're not adopting that for political reasons. Every nation wants to establish their own authority and their own sovereigns, and they don't want to rely on the authority of another government. That is why other nations are following it. But for us as Muslims in the West, there isn't a centralized leadership. There isn't a centralized leadership. Therefore, we're more honest to that ruling. If we say global is global. The issue is with Western Muslims, they also have a problem. Their problem is, if it's Saudi, they have this bias with Saudi. If it's Saudi, we accept it. If it's not Saudi, we don't accept it. There's this bias because, right, we love the haram, but it's not rational. It's not based on ration. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. If you're going to accept Saudi, there's no difference between Saudi, Yemen, Kenya, Tanzania, here. Doesn't matter. They're all the same. The moon is one. We're all looking at the same moon. If they see it, whoever sees it, doesn't matter. We saw the moon. But for some reason, even within Muslim leaders, you find this problem. If Saudi accepts it, I remember the year that Yemen saw it, nobody accepted it. Then I think a year or two later, Saudi saw it. And everybody like, okay, Saudi saw it. And I was like, just a few years ago, Yemen saw it, but you guys were all reluctant. Like nobody wanted to accept it because it was Yemen. And then similarly, there was another time that I think Kenya, Tanzania, and Mauritania saw it. And there was this hesitancy, like they saw it, it's not reliable. And then Saudi was the only one that saw it in the Middle East, and it's like, khalas, we got the approval, bismillah, let's fast. So that inconsistency is problematic. If you're accepting global siding, don't discriminate between nations. If a Muslim sees it, they're trustworthy, you adopt it. Unless you go with local siding. If you go with local siding, it doesn't matter who sees it. You're only following your locality. That is also an option. But this choosing of nations and choosing of what region you take and you don't take, that is problematic. That isn't accurate and consistent. Does that make sense? And the last and final opinion is calculations. So the last and final opinion is those who adopt calculations. The calendar is there. Some nations, Turkey and surrounding nations, adopt calculation. They say, it's set. They have their Ramadan, their Eid set for the next number of years. They adopt calculation. They say, just like you follow calculation for Salah, we follow calculation for the moon. Salah is based on the sun, the month is based on the moon. Don't discriminate, be consistent. They have their own reasoning. So those who follow calculation, that's also respectable. That's an acceptable opinion. They follow calculations. There's some masajid in the US that are following it. It's gaining more prominence, but it's not too popular yet. Many masajid are very hesitant because of just pressure, the norms, and so on and so forth. They're still very hesitant with calculations. And so those are the three opinions. Haji, do you have another question regarding that?
In Saudi, they reside even with microscope.
Yes.
If they reside with microscope, if they take the microscope, the moon is not there.
Right. Right. So no, using a tool is completely fine. If they use a microscope to see it, that's okay. As long as they saw it, it's sufficient.
If there's no microscope, they cannot see it.
If there's no microscope, they don't see it. And so that is why you do according to the best of your ability. Does that make sense? So if you have the technology to see, then great. So, and then this is the argument that the calculation argument is made. They're like, we're using astronomical means and calculations and technology to calculate Eid. So just like you're using a telescope, we're using a different means of technology and science. So we're doing the same thing with just a different means. Does that make sense? We're not using the eye, but we're using the mind, which fulfills the same purpose. and we're using tools and so on. So there's this argument between the three groups, the three kind of primary opinions: local, global, calculation. Does that make sense? Local, global, and calculation. There's no Saudi though. There's no, that doesn't exist. So let's take that out of our heads and break away from that. Practically, follow the masjid and community you fast and you pray Eid with. That's the easiest. Because I'm speaking from a more like theoretical or academic perspective. Like, what is the fiqh of this? As an everyday Muslim trying to fast Ramadan, what do? Go to your local masjid, the masjid that you fast with and you pray Eid with. Go with them. Simple, easy, don't confuse yourself. Go with the masjid that you fast and pray Eid with. Fast with them, pray Eid with them, and you're good. You should be fine, inshallah ta'ala. Karana.
Yeah, you see, like 30 years ago, right? We don't have internet yet.
You're right.
And right now we have internet. Then how about the day of Arafah? If we, maybe we don't follow Saudi. I'm not, like on the side Saudi,
Yeah.
But the Arafah has to be on that day.
No. Arafat is not based on the Mecca. The Arafah for them can be a different day than Arafah for us.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? Arafah in Mecca can be different day than Arafah for us. Arafah is based on the sighting of the moon. It's based on the sighting of the moon. Does that make sense? So we always base it on the sighting of the moon. Saudi didn't see the hilal. Their Arafah is a day later than maybe us in the United States, we saw the hilal. If we see the hilal and Saudi didn't see it, do we say, okay, no, don't follow that because Saudi is going to wait an extra day. Nobody start your month yet. Are we going to say that? No. We're going to have Arafah before them. But for them, they're going to have Arafah a day later because they didn't see the hilal. Does that make sense? So the same hukum, Arafah doesn't have to be the same day for the entire world. Every region is going according to their sight. Does that make sense? And if you accept global sighting, whoever sees it, you accept it. Even if Saudi didn't see it. Saudi didn't see it, that's fine. That's for them to figure out. But us, we saw it. So they're acting according to the knowledge they have. And we're acting according to the knowledge that we have. And that is the wajib in Sharia. The wajib in Sharia is that you act according to what you're certain of. You act according to what you're certain of. Not what other people are certain of. So we saw the hilal. We're certain the month has started. So they said, no, we didn't see it. We're not certain. Does that make sense? We have to act according to what we're confident of. We saw that, we're certain. They didn't. So they're doing according to what they know. Does that make sense? So again, even with Arafah, it is not tied to Saudi. It is tied to the moon. Anything that has to do with the month or day, it is tied to the moon. We look at the moon, and every region is responsible for themselves.
Because the Hajj, right? The Hajj should be, have to be that day, No. It's by the sighting of the moon. It's by the sighting of the moon. That is what's supposed to be. It's by the sighting of the moon, not by Saudi. Take that out the window. Throw it out. That doesn't exist in Sharia. It's not by Saudi. It's by the sighting of the moon. And just like the example I gave, if we see it and they didn't, who's right, us or them? We're right. But they're doing Arafah late. Are they sinful? No. They didn't see it. But who's technically right? Us. We saw it. So are we going to leave what is right because they didn't see it? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Right. So that's the hukum. It isn't based on Saudi. It's based on the moon. Even if the Hajjaj are doing their Arafah a day after, they can do theirs based on what they know. But we have knowledge of what we're doing, and we're doing it confidently, and we're doing it based on reliable knowledge. We're okay. We're doing what we're supposed to do. Everybody fulfilled their wajib with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that make sense? If you don't want to miss the ajr of Arafah, you want to be safe. If you want to be safe, make ibadah on both days. Right? If you want to be safe, you're like, I don't know. They saw it, we didn't see it. Okay, I'm going to do ibadah both days. Okay, make zikr, read Quran, make takbir, tasbih, make dua. Either situation, you got it. Either situation, you got it. You have to celebrate the Eid according to what you know. But dua and ibadah, you can do it both days. Does that make sense? So you can still get the virtue. You just don't fast. You celebrate your Eid, the day of your Eid, but you can do all the ibadat other than that. Yes?
I mean, and like for most of the history of the deen, like people have done it on different days because it's only until technology became, the global like connection became so instant.
Exactly.
That's when the disputes started happening. But
Right.
I'm pretty sure the norm is for most people doing it different days.
Right.
Everybody sees it.
And that was the norm since the time of Sahaba. Since the time of Sahaba, it was the norm. I remember that I forget there was a narration like Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhuma, he went from one city to another, and I think he started his Ramadan a day late. And when he came, he found out, oh, they're already started to fast. And they're like, we saw the hilal. So what do the scholars say? If you come a city that saw the moon setting and you find out, you start fasting right at that time, and then you make up that day. That was the way of the ummah, because there was no global communication, so every really city had their own sighting. It wasn't until that, like you said, the advancement of communication and technology that now like we're trying to figure out how do we work as a global, how do we establish a global unity of the ummah. Does that make sense? That's where we're at right now. How do we establish a global unity? So, it's a new issue, and people are trying to navigate it, and they're still trying to figure out, how we deal with those issues. Nation states are a new system. Before in the ummah, there were governors. There was no nation state. Right? Basra had a governor, Egypt, and the cities had their own governors, Iraq, Africa, Asia, India. Everybody had governors, but there were no nation states. But there were no borders. You were Muslim, you go anywhere in the Muslim land. Right? And the borders came, all these rules were set, the passports were made, you can't cross borders, resources were separated, these people are underprivileged, opportunities aren't shared across the world, certain nations are taking majority of the world's resources while others are being subjugated and disadvantaged. All of that is based on the European colonialism. So colonialism ended, but the effects of it continue to, it pretty much structured the world the way the world works today, right? And that's why Europe still, right, Europe and is still dominant, right? They're still the dominant force. Europe, US and Europe-based nations, they're still the dominant force. Ever since colonialism, they control the world and they set up everything to their advantage. And so everybody's playing catch-up. Everybody's behind playing catch-up. But all of this came from the system that was set up, and it's a new phenomenon that the world and the scholars are trying to navigate. And so then, inshallah, the next masail that we spoke about are the conditions of wujub. One is fasting wajib and one is fasting valid. We said that fasting is valid if you have 4 requirements. You have to be Muslim. We said a non-Muslim can fast, but it doesn't count as ibadah. It's simply an experience. They can have an experience, but it isn't ibadah. It isn't something valid that they get rewarded for. Sanity, of course, they have to be sane, mentally sound. And this means that children under the age of 8, they're not mentally fully developed, and they're not comprehensive. We call that the age of discernment. They can fast to get this to practice a few hours, but it isn't an ibadah they get rewarded for. Purity from hayd, women on menses cannot fast. We talked about what if a woman, finishes her menses in the middle of the day? Is she allowed to continue eating? So if a woman is on her menses, then at dhuhr time, her menses ends. Can she continue eating the rest of the day although her menses ended? And the Shafi'i school is no. She cannot eat the rest of the day for the sanctity of that day because it's the day of Ramadan. She has to make it up, but she doesn't eat the rest of that day. Other scholars have said since her fasting isn't obligated from the beginning, she's allowed to eat. And so I advise to stick to the Shafi'i school, but if a person adopts the second, it's also a valid opinion. Does that masala make sense? Is it clear? And then the third is knowledge of its appropriate time, knowing that the time has entered. And then 5 conditions for obligation. Islam is obligatory when you're a Muslim. And the next one is taklif. You have to be mukallaf. You have to reach the age of puberty and sanity. So when a person is mukallaf, they're obligated to fast. Prior to that, they don't. And we said that fasting has to be made up if a person misses any fast after puberty. Until Yawm al-Qiyamah. If they miss any fasting, tawbah, you can make 1,000,000 tawbah, it doesn't matter. You have to make up your fasting. All right? So it's tawbah. Remember with salah, we said the scholars predominantly say once you hit puberty, you have to make up your salah. A very minority said, no, you don't. Amma for fasting, everybody said you do, unless you're a disbeliever. Disbelievers don't make up fasting. But Muslim, you're Muslim and you were reaching puberty, you didn't fast. Every day that you miss, even if it's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you have to start making up those fasts. But you do it in a slow, gradual manner that's achievable, not in a way that is unachievable. Ability, we said ability is to have the physical ability to fast. There isn't a disability preventing you, yarhamukallah. Right? So you don't have diabetes, you don't have dialysis, you don't have something of that sort, old age. You are physically able. And then illness is there isn't a health condition that's preventing you from fasting. Yarhamukallah. Illness means there isn't a health, or health means there isn't an illness, illness that's preventing you from fasting. You don't have a cold, you don't have a fever, you're not needing to take medication. Your illness isn't going to get worse. And I mentioned a rule about illness. If you're going to get sick, or your illness is going to become worse, or your recovery is going to be delayed, you can break your fasting. 3 things. If fasting is going to make you sick, or make your sickness worse, or delay your recovery, you can break your fasting. If any of those 3 apply to you, you can break your fasting. So be wise. If you see yourself already exhausted middle of the day, you're starting to get a temper, you're dehydrated, I would advise, in my personal experience, break your fast. You'd rather catch the illness early before you wait till Maghrib time and then eat, and then you're sick for a week trying to recover. Does that make sense? But if you're starting to feel like, okay, I'm catching a fever, I'm catching a cold, I'm not feeling well, I'm getting some shivering, break your fast. Start hydrating yourself. Start recovering. Start taking medication so that the illness doesn't continue for a longer period, right? So anytime illness is, you fear that it will cause an illness, it will delay your recovery or increase your illness, you are allowed to fast. And the last requirement or obligation is that you have to be muqim, non-traveler. If you are a traveler, you can break your fast if you like. Even if you travel the whole month of Ramadan ongoing. If you are a truck driver or something, and you drive nationally, or you even drive the distance of 48 miles or more on a daily basis, you can break your fast every day. You can break your fast every day. So this is permissible for travelers, but they don't have to. They don't have to. If you want to fast, fast. La bas. Yes. Yeah. So you don't have to break your, it's not wajib on you, but it's valid for you to fast. If you're traveling, it's valid for you to fast, but you do not have to fast. Yeah, for wajib fasting, you don't break it. Yeah, once you start fasting a wajib fast, making it up, or in Ramadan, it's the same. It's a wajib fast. You don't break a wajib fast except for the valid excuses. Sunnah fast you can break. If you're fasting on a Monday, somebody invited you over for lunch, and they insisted on you eating, and you're like, you know what, it's okay, I'm just going to eat. You can do that. It's fine. It's permissible. You just got hungry. You just had maybe the previous day you didn't eat much, and you're like, I'm really, really exhausted. I can't even perform in my job. I can't stay awake. I'm just going to break my fast. Sunnah fast, you can do that. Wajib fast, you can't, unless it's a cause of risk to your health or delays your recovery. Is that clear? And then he says, rahimahullah, there are the integrals of fasting. The arkan of fasting Ramadan are 3. You need 3 arkan, three pillars, 3 essential things for your fasting to be valid. Number 1, to make an intention at night for each day of the fard. So the opinion of the Shafi'i school, which I believe is to be the majority opinion, is that you have to make an independent fast for each night. And typically, what the Shafi'i scholars encourage is to also make the intention for the month. They also say at the beginning of Ramadan, make the intention that you're going to fast the entire month. Why do they say that? They say if you forget to fast a night, you can adopt the second opinion that says fasting for the entire month can be done one time. The Shafi'i school, they say you have to make a separate intention per night. Separate intention per night. So the Shafi'is typically, when they break their fast, they make intention for the next day. That's the practice. They break their fast. They say, "Nawaitu sawm fard yawm ghad." I intend to fast the obligatory fasting of tomorrow. So they make their fasting for each day. But they say, because oftentimes people forget, you make your intention also to fast the entire month. So that if you forget to fast a day, you make the intention for a day, you can adopt the opinion of the Maliki school that says an intention for the entire month is valid. Right? And this is called intentionality, right? You have to be mindful, right? You have to be very mindful of what you're doing and conscious of that. Not just doing it kind of subconsciously, but actually bringing that intention to mind. And then we mentioned that the Maliki school, with the Hanbali school, I believe, with them, they don't have this kind of strict requirement of niyyah having to be brought to conscious at the time of the ibadah. They say when you got up for suhoor, that establishes your intent in the fast. Does that make sense? So the Hanbali school, they don't require this mindful intention. For them is, if your behavior indicates you're performing this ibadah, that means you already made an intention. If your behavior indicates you're performing this ibadah, that means you already made the intention. So when you walk into the masjid, you already made the intention to pray the fard. When you got up for suhoor, you already made the intention to fast that day. Does that make sense? So that's the most lenient opinion is that. They don't require a conscious, mindful intention. And that's also a really valid and strong opinion, personally. And it's more in line with the human nature and human way of thinking. Is that human beings, we're not, most of our intention isn't something that we do with, this kind of like moment of stopping and thinking and bringing to mind, right? Intention is kind of usually done in the process. It's kind of a thought and then you start acting on it, right? And it isn't something that you have to stop for and bring to the presence to mind, but the majority of fuqaha, they require that. They require that requirement. So I personally adopt it and apply it, but that other opinion also has a strong argument and a strong reasoning behind it. Fuadi, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just saying, usually speak a little bit of the mind. I think you kind of covered it. Is that mindful intention speaking it?
Yeah.
How do you bring it?
It's to bring a thought to mind, right? So what does it mean to be a mindful intention? You actually bring that thought to mind. You take for a moment, you consciously think of it, I will fast the fard of tomorrow. It doesn't have to be in Arabic. It doesn't even have to be a word, but it's a thought. And if you say it, if it helps you, it's fine. Does that make sense? But you actually take a moment and you bring that thought to mind. So that's what we mean. And then so they require that, and that is the requirement of the Shafi'i school. Number 2, to refrain from intentionally doing things which break the fast. Right? So anything that breaks the fast, you refrain from it. And what are these things that break the fast? Anything, I don't know if he defines it. Anything that enters the body from an opening breaks the fast. So that means anything that enters the body, why do we say opening? The mouth, the nose, the ears, the nose, and the rectal. And also for women, vaginal. Anything that is inserted into the body through an opening nullifies the fasting. They don't say eating or drinking. Does that make sense? The fuqaha are very precise. So if you take any medication through the rectal, or a woman takes something through vaginal insertion, or eardrops, nose spray, anything through the mouth, all of these are openings of the body that nullify the fasting. Does that make sense? And then also what nullifies the fasting is sexual intercourse. Foreplay is haram, according to I believe the majority of our scholars. I know the Shafi'i school and the majority of our scholars, just kind of like, kissing and
kind of romantically, not just casually or just kind of like a goodbye kiss, but romantic kiss is haram. Any type of sexual behavior, although there's no sexual intercourse that follows, is haram, but it doesn't break your fast. But what breaks your fast is actual intercourse. It's haram, but doesn't break your fast. It's haram, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't be romantic and engaging in sexual romance during fasting, but it doesn't break your fast. What breaks your fast is actual intercourse, is what breaks the fast. Is that clear?
When you say haram, you mean in relation to fasting?
Yeah, it's sinful. Yeah, during the time of fasting, it's a sin to do that.
But
Outside it's permissible, of course, it's your spouse. But during the time of fasting, it's sinful. During the time of fasting, it's sinful, according to the majority. Others have permitted it. They say it's permissible, but the majority say no, it's haram. In the Shafi'i school specifically, I'm confident that I know that it's haram. And intercourse is what nullifies the fasting. All the other etiquettes of fasting don't break your fasting. And getting angry, a lot of people, they confuse this. Getting angry, listening to music, lying, cheating, hurting others, all of that nullifies the reward of fasting. It takes away the reward of fasting, but it doesn't invalidate your fasting. What does it mean to lose the reward, but your fasting to be valid? It means you check the box of fasting, but there's nothing coming your way for that fasting. There's no ajr. There's no blessings. Zero. You exhausted yourself. You check the box. Yes, you have fulfilled the day, so now you don't have to make it up. Does that make sense? But there's no reward you hope for. Reward is dependent on the condition of your heart and the quality of your character. Just like salah. A person prays salah, they will be rewarded according to their sincerity, their humility, their presence. Somebody might pray salah from takbir to salam, they get no reward. But they check the box. They prayed dhuhr today. They prayed maghrib today. They checked it. Check. You don't have to make up that salah. But they had no presence, no humility, no sincerity. Their character is horrible. They don't obey Allah. They don't follow the character of Islam. Yes, you fulfill the wajib. Great. Because now this is a great accomplishment. We're not minimizing it. But if you want reward and blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it, that depends on how much that worship transformed your heart. That depends on how much that worship transformed your heart. And that is why we said, don't treat worship as a transaction. Worship has to be transformational. Every time you worship, you should be impacted. You feel this sense of presence with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This humility, this remorse, this awareness, this patience, this gratitude. All of these qualities and meanings enter your heart, right? You reflect on the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what brings your deeds to acceptance and gives it reward. Does that make sense? The difference between the validity and reward, or they call it sihha and qabul. Validity versus acceptance. So you're valid, you might be valid, but your soul wasn't accepted by Allah for Him to reward you. So you were rejected. But in fiqh, you were accepted. In fiqh, you were accepted. And so that's why the scholars, they divide the sciences into two. Or there are many ways, but one of the two ways to divide it, they say there's the rulings of acceptance and there's the rulings of validity. Fiqh teaches you the rulings of validity. Amma the rulings of acceptance has to do with the sciences of the heart. The sciences of the heart. And in there they teach you how to have humility, sincerity, awareness of Allah, presence, how to experience the sweetness of faith, worshiping Allah as if you see Him, reflecting and concentration, crying and weeping, gratitude, wara', this cautiousness when it comes to your deen, zuhud, refraining from anything that is wasteful and distracting from Allah, patience, all of these qualities. These are qualities of the heart. So the science of the heart, which they call ilm al-tazkiyah or ilm al-suluk, is the science that teaches you how to reach a state where your deeds are accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fiqh is teaching you how to perform your deeds in a way that you fulfill the requirements of Sharia. It's valid. Does that make sense? So
This is just, we don't want to, and in my previous khutbah, I kind of explained that, but I didn't use the best of words to explain that concept that people think just because I fast and I don't commit zina and I fast, I pray salah and, you know, I'm a good Muslim, like I'm among the righteous. No, you fulfill the wajib of sharia. Being among the righteous, that's built inside your heart. Where is your heart with Allah? Right? Imam Shafi'i would say, I love the righteous, but I'm not from them. Right? The famous saying of Imam Shafi'i, right? This great scholar who the whole ummah is indebted to. He's saying, I love the righteous, but I'm not from them. Because he sees the flaws of his human nafs. This forgetfulness, this negligence, heedlessness, mistakes, right? Desires, temptations, the absence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He sees that this nafs is so weak. As much as we strive, we can never give Allah the haqq He deserves. So we can never assume that we're among the righteous. Right? We're Muslim, we adhere to the deen, and we hope by that Allah will grant us mercy. Not our deeds will grant us Jannah, but by that Allah will grant us mercy and reward us. Right? That will reward us, right? So this is something, one of the scholars, he wrote a book, the Hikam al-Ata'iyah, he says, one of the most important or sign, he said, is like depending on your deeds. The first thing he mentions, right? He said, he warns about depending on, he has a whole section about it. But don't depend on your deeds, depend on Allah. Depend on Allah's mercy, you're not depending on your deeds. It is by Allah's virtue you enter Jannah, not by your deeds. But you hope that your deeds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look at you with mercy because of the attempt and struggle that you made. But not that your deeds deserve the reward of Allah. You hope that Allah will consider you and give you mercy because of what you have done. So this is something that we need to clarify and educate ourselves about, because we've reached this a stage in Islam and in the world today where we've become very superficial about Islam. We think Islam is growing a beard and having a thobe and having a hijab and praying salah and going to the masjid, and you have horrible akhlaq. You have no awareness of Allah, no presence, no dhikr. You don't remember Allah at all your private moments. You're absent-minded. You think that learning knowledge is to learn halal and haram and tafsir and hadith. Knowledge is what brings you the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is true knowledge. So there's this mistake that's happening within the ummah where we've become superficial with Islam and we're neglecting the inner meanings of Islam. And that is the greatest sunnah. The great sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is to be with Allah all the time. That is the deep sunnah. Right? And so that is what we really want to make sure we never neglect and we always prioritize. And then he says, rahimahullah, he says, for the one who is conscious of his fast and is not ignorant. Right? And so here he's clarifying that if you break your fast out of forgetfulness, there is no sin on you and it doesn't break your fast. So if you drank and ate, especially the first few days of Ramadan, you're used to eating. So you just get up in the morning, you're having your couple of dates or your cup of water, or especially if you go to work or school or something, you're just eating, and sometimes you eat a whole meal. And you're like, subhanAllah, it's Ramadan, I'm supposed to be fasting. You're fasting, you're okay. As long as the time you remember, you spit out all the food. As long as the time you remember, you spit out all the food. A mas'ala that has become somewhat widespread is that this hukum of continuing to eat if you have food in your mouth, even if after the adhan is called. This is a very, very weak opinion, and not adopted by the four schools. This concept of, if the adhan is made and I have food in my mouth, I'm allowed to finish it. The ayah says, eat and drink until you see the white thread from the black. So as soon as the light of dawn appears, it means don't eat and drink. Because the verse said what? Eat and drink until you see this. Once you see this, it says don't. So by the text of the Quran, if you're eating after the break of dawn, you haven't followed that verse. They have some ahadith they follow, but the scholars, they say, listen, the text of the Quran says this and it's very explicit. So even if there are ahadith, they're abrogated by this verse. You understand? That's why the majority of the scholars, they didn't adopt that position, but this is a position that has become somewhat popular today, and so be mindful of that. Spit out whatever food you have once the adhan is made. Do not swallow a grain of food after the adhan has been made. It is not permissible, and it will nullify your fast. Wallahu a'lam.
Where did this come from that
There's a hadith. There's a hadith that they follow, and it's a minority opinion. The adopted majority of scholars rejected it because of the explicit text of the Quran. There's some other masail I would like to add, just so that maybe, in case I don't remember later. If you start your day of fasting in a state of janaba, your fasting is valid. So let's say a man had intercourse or a woman, they had intercourse at night, they didn't take a shower before Fajr. Is their fasting valid? Yes. Ghusl isn't required for the validity of fasting. It just means that intercourse cannot happen during fasting, but shower can happen after the day has begun. In the beginning of Islam, the first generation, there was some debate within the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. They were arguing, how about if a man is in the state of janaba when they wake? So some scholars give the fatwa, no, his fasting is nullified because he's still in the state of janaba. But and then later on it was clarified by the fuqaha and the scholars of hadith know that's incorrect. That if a person, even if they wake up in the state of janaba, their fasting is still valid. If they had a wet dream, their fasting is still valid. Is that clear? Yes, brother.
Just to clarify, if you have an act of intimacy with your partner, but it's after you've done everything from Fajr to Maghrib, is that okay?
After Maghrib to Fajr is permissible.
Okay, so if it's like at nighttime.
Permissible. That's the verse of the Quran. Subhanallah. أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ. Being intimate with your spouses has been permitted for you during the night of fasting. So it's explicit by the Quran. During the night of fasting, it's allowed to be intimate with the spouse. Right. And then the last hukum, he says the fasting person himself. And then now he's going to talk about some rulings about making up in Kaffarah. This is on page 108. He says, rahimahullah, major kafara and specified punishment are compulsory, together with making up the fast for he who breaks his fast of Ramadan a complete day by having complete intercourse in which he becomes sinner in his fast. He says in the footnote, the legal occasion of the offense is the particular day of fasting, so that if it were committed on 2 separate days, 2 separate expiations would be necessary, though if it were committed twice in one day, there would be only one expiation. The expiation consists of freeing a sound Muslim slave, or if not possible, then to fast the days of 2 consecutive months. If this is not possible, then the expiation is to feed 60 poor persons, which is 509 grams of food per each day. If one is unable to do this, the expiation remains as an unperformed obligation upon the person concerned. The woman with whom intercourse is performed is not obliged to expiate it. And so this is speaking about a man who has intercourse during the day of fasting. That is the greatest sin of a person can do when they're fasting, is to have intercourse. And if they do, they have to pay the greatest kafara, and which is they have to fast. They have to first free a Muslim slave. Slavery has been abrogated. Second, they fast for 22 consecutive months, 60 consecutive days. And so the punishment is heavy. The punishment is heavy. 60 days of consecutive fasting for undisciplining yourself 1 day of Ramadan. Right? So this is something to be careful of and mindful of. And then the third is if that's not possible and they're not able to fast for 2 consecutive months, then they feed 60 poor people. It's 509 grams of food per day. Is that clear? All right. Huh?
I want to say 2 months a day, in our Islamic calendar, you have 29 and 30, that they follow the calendar.
They follow the calendar, the Islamic calendar. If it's 29 and 30, 29 and 30. If it's 29 and 29, 29 and 29. Yeah, absolutely correct.
Kaffarah have to be 60.
60 poor people. Yes, if you pay kafara, 60 poor people.
64 people a day.
60 poor people. Sorry.
4 people a day.
60 poor people to feed 60 poor persons, not a day. Just total. You feed 60 poor persons. And then he says, rahimahullah, there are 6 situations in which it is compulsory for one to abstain from things which break his fast and also necessitate making up the fast of that, the making up of that fast later. So there are 6 cases where you have to fast, but you also have to make up your fast. Does that make sense? You have to fast, but you have to also make it up. What are these 6 cases? Number 1, breaking his fast with a wrong act from his side in the month of Ramadan only. He said, like a person who is intoxicated from the night until the morning of Ramadan. It is binding for him to abstain from things which break the fast and also recover the fast later. Is that clear? So he caused himself not to fast properly. They got intoxicated during the night, and in the morning they woke up and they were still a bit intoxicated or hungover. That person's fasting is not valid, yet they have to refrain from food the rest of the day. Is that clear? Number 2, one who omits the intention a night for the fard fast. Remember what we said about Shafi'i school? They require a night. If you don't make the intention, you got to make up that day, and you fast that day. And that's why they gave the Maliki opinion that you just make the intention for the whole month. So when the month begins, make the intention for the whole month, inshallah. And if you break your fast, any of the days of Ramadan, you start over again and make the intention for the whole month again. Does that make sense? If it gets interrupted, you do it again. If a woman has her menses, she makes the intention for the whole month after her menses ends. Is that clear? And then, number 3, upon the one who has sahur. Sahur is the early breakfast. Thinking that the night still remains, but it was not so. So the Shafi'i are very strict about this mas'ala. They say if you mistakenly ate during the day thinking it was still night, you have to fast. And you have to make it the fast. Is that clear? There's an opinion which is pretty strong that says no. If you did your due diligence and that's what you found and that's what you assumed, then you don't have to make it up. Sometimes it happens if somebody has an adhan app and their settings aren't according to their locality. And so you might get time for Fajr, which is like 30 minutes later than the rest of the Jama'ah. And you end up following that for weeks. And then you realize that somebody's like, no, adhan is not at that time. And you're like, subhanAllah, I was fasting for the entire month like this. And so the Shafi'i school, they're like, no, you got to make it up the whole month. Because you were eating during the daytime. That was your fault. You should have done your due diligence and make sure the settings were, correct. Does that make sense? But in that type of case, if it's a day or 2, I would say stick to that to be safe. If it's a long period of time, then adopt the second opinion to not make it overwhelming and burdening for that person. But if a person is able to be disciplined, I would encourage they make it up to avoid the dispute between the scholars and to avoid any doubt. Does that make sense? This means up until the adhan, and then number 4, he's going to say the one who breaks the fast thinking that the sun has set, but it was not so. So he's saying you miscounted the time of Fajr and the time of Maghrib. Either case. Maghrib is at the correct timing is 8:45 or 7:20. You have an app, your settings are somewhat off for whatever reason, you adopted some other region's settings or something, because the settings are very important. And so your adhan says adhan is at 7 o'clock or 7:10. You ate 10 minutes before the adhan. You ate before the time, you broke your fast. You have to make up that fast. Does that make sense? Just because it was innocent mistake, you still have it doesn't excuse you. You have to make up that fast. Does that make sense? The Shafi'i are very strict. Just because it was an innocent mistake, they don't excuse you. They said you have to make up that fast. Same with Fajr. You were eating at the time of dawn, thinking dawn didn't begin yet. And you're still eating. Just because you made that mistake, it doesn't excuse you. It's an innocent mistake. You have no sin for a mistake, inshallah. But you're obligated to make it the fast. And fast the remainder of that day.
Would you say it's safer then to instead of using the time, just go off of the sun? Because from a clock perspective, 2 minutes before Maghrib is very precise. So if you eat 2 minutes before Maghrib, it's broken. But if you're just looking at the sun, 2 minutes, not much of a change.
Yeah.
So my question is is it okay to, if you break your fast 2 minutes early, but that's 2 minutes and it doesn't really change like that versus someone who's using the sun.
Yeah. I think with 2 minutes, flexibility can be given. With 2 minutes, flexibility can be given, wallahu alam. But once you go beyond 2 minutes, then, you're in trouble. You shouldn't take that lightly. But your question about can we rely on the moon, the actual sighting of the sunset rather than just a calculation? The problem with that is seeing the sunset by the naked eye in a city with many infrastructures is pretty difficult and accurate to get right. It's difficult to get right. Before, there weren't so many city lights, right? There were no city lights, and there weren't so many infrastructures. You can simply step out of town and just look. It was easy. But now, you know, you got buildings for miles, you know, and if you go on a hill, it depends on where you're positioned and how well you're able to see the sunset. Sometimes the sunset sets and it still looks like it's daytime, and sometimes the sunset sets and it looks like it's almost about to be Isha time. So because of the clouds and how especially in our city, where we have a very cloudy region, we live in a very cloudy region. So because of these just kind of factors, relying on the naked eye to see the sunset and dawn is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult. And so therefore, with a minute or two, I wouldn't be too strict. But once you start getting 4, 5, 10 minutes, 5 minutes ahead, then at that point, I'm just like, okay, you know what? Like, you should make up those fasts to be safe. If you want to take the second opinion that excuses you for your ignorance, it's an option. But I would encourage making it up to be safe. Wallahu a'lam. The Shafi'i school, if you're following the Shafi'i law, they say make it up. There's no debate. I remember a brother came to me years ago, and there were some foreign brothers, and they came to me and they said, "Ya Sheikh, we were continuing to eat until a bit after dawn, about 15 or so minutes." I was like, "Yeah, that fast didn't count. Just eat the remainder of the day," and it was a sunnah fast. And then the brother, he's like, "Why did you give us that fatwa?" I called my sheikh, and our sheikh said something different. They call the sheikh from back home. I said, "That's a different opinion. I mean, you can adopt that as well. You ask me. I'm going to give you what I believe to be, you know, what I practice and what I know. So that's my role and responsibility." So and I said, "Alhamdulillah, you have your intention. You got the reward. Don't be upset. You know, Allah give you you get the full reward, and you get to eat." So it was actually a kind of, you know, a mercy for you, not a disadvantage. It was an advantage for you that I gave you that fatwa, you know. So anyways, that's kind of the fiqh of it, inshallah ta'ala. Did I see a hand up back there? Andrew?
Maybe you covered it. It was just about sleeping. I've heard some conflicting thoughts on that. Like if you're fasting and it's like you take a nap, but it's not deep sleep.
No, you can fast during sleep. You can fast the whole day of sleep if you wanted. It doesn't affect your fasting. You just lose any ibadah you would do. If you work graveyard and you sleep throughout the day, you know, you work a night shift, it's permissible. If you purposely sleep throughout the day to, you know, just kind of, you know, control the hunger or whatever, right? It's permissible. It's not sinful.
With the rewards, or does that take away?
It doesn't take away the rewards necessary, but it takes away the opportunity of attaining ibadah, right? Of doing ibadah. Therefore, it doesn't decrease the reward of your fast. It does decrease the reward because fasting is based on sincerity. If you're asleep, you're not doing worship, right? So you can still get reward for the time you are awake, yes. But yeah, if you do sleep, you get less reward, in the sense that your experience of fasting is less and less and less. Does that make sense? Compared to the one who is awake. But it doesn't affect the validity. But it does decrease your reward, yes. And that intention becomes ibadah. That sleep turns into ibadah. If you're making the intention to nap, you're napping with the intention to get energy to do more ibadah, then that sleep is a means by which you're drawing close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can turn that into an ibadah, but you just got to make a good intention. I encourage taking nap during Ramadan. I highly encourage it. I found a personal experience that it's very helpful, very effective. It helps maintain your immune system, because you stay dehydrated. If you don't hydrate properly, you're prone to get sick. That's why a lot of people, they get sick midway into Ramadan or the end of Ramadan, catch a cold, whatever, even if it's in the summertime. And so a lot of that is due to the fact that their immune system is weak from, the fasting of every day. So something to combat that, of course, is to, stay hydrated throughout the night as much as you can. That's why people carry water bottles throughout Taraweeh. They keep drinking, and after Taraweeh, keep drinking. Because you're trying to get a day's need of water in 4 or 5 hours. Drinking a large amount of water is unhealthy, or your body can't absorb it all, right? You just end up urinating frequently.
So if you want to stay hydrated in a healthy way during Ramadan, from the moment you break your fast until the moment you sleep, drink small portions of water throughout the night. And another thing to help with your immune system during the day is take a nap. And it'll give your body the energy to it gives you another boost of energy to stay healthy and strong. If you do that, inshallah, you should go throughout the month of Ramadan. You should go through the month of Ramadan without getting ill. A lot of people, they get ill. When I always ask them, like, do you take a nap? No. Do you stay hydrated throughout the night and constantly drink water throughout the night? They're like, no, I don't usually do that. I'm like, your body's gonna get worn out, and you're gonna get sick because you're dehydrated and you're not getting sleep. So I encourage taking a nap and make that intention for the sake of Allah to continue doing more ibadah, and so that nap turns into worship, inshallah ta'ala. Does that help? Okay. So 4 cases. The number 5, upon one who has reckoned the 30th of Sha'ban to be the first day of Ramadan. So this person, it's the 30th of Sha'ban, and then they found out, no, today is actually the 1st of Ramadan. They got to fast the rest of that day and make it up. We mentioned the story of, I think, Abdullah bin Abbas, who didn't fast in his city, then he went to another city and they were actually fasting. They said, we saw the hilal. He fasted that day, the remaining day. And so the scholars concluded that you have to make up the fast. Well, I believe that was the meaning of the athar. But the conclusion is, if you found out, even after you started the day, you refrain from eating and you make up the day. And then number 6, one who was excessive in gargling and putting water into the nostrils to such an extent that the water goes down the throat. And so they say when you're in Ramadan, when you make wudu, you have to gargle your water, light gargling and sniff a light amount of water. You shouldn't make your wudu the way you usually do it before Ramadan. And so if you excessively gargle water and excessively sniff water and you end up swallowing some of that because of your behavior, you have to fast the remainder of that day and make it up. The shafi'i are very strict when it comes to this. Does that make sense? So during Ramadan, make sure that your gargling of water and your sniffing of water is light. Don't what have you. If you do it on accident and you end up actually swallowing some of it and you're certain, then in that case, you can make it up. And if you want to adopt a second opinion that says what is accidental or unknowingly done, there's no sin for it and it doesn't need to be made up. That's also a strong opinion, and so that's an opinion somebody could adopt. Wallahu a'lam. Is that clear? This masail? And then he says, rahimahullah, fasting is nullified with apostasy, menstruation, postnatal bleeding, childbirth, insanity even for a moment, unconsciousness, and unlawful intoxicants if they last for the entire day. So he says right here, let's continue. If a person apostates from Islam, they leave the fold of Islam and come back, their fasting is nullified. And then hayd, if a woman has her menses, her fasting is nullified even if it's 5 minutes before adhan, right? If she fasted the whole day, the menses comes, right? Our women, deal with that, and they get the ajr of fasting those hours that they fasted. But from a fiqhi perspective, they have to make it up, and that could be a means to elevate their status with Allah subhanahu wa taala in the akhirah, right? But it's an extra burden that you fasted a half day or you fasted 90% of the day, and then now your menses comes, right? So in that case, that hayd or nullifies her fasting and must be made up. When he fasts, postnatal bleeding, childbirth, also. Junoon, and insanity even for a moment. If a person loses their mind, they have a mental breakdown or they have a mental episode where they're mentally not present or not comprehensive or not comprehending, their fasting is nullified. Their fasting is nullified if a person has a mental episode. For those who are struggling with, psychosis or schizophrenia or things like that, they might have this, or just high amounts of stress can create psychosis, and so on. So if they experience any of that where they're blanking out, they're having a mental episode, they're not present, or not comprehending what's going on around them, their fasting is nullified, even if it's for a short moment. Amma, he says, when it comes to unconsciousness and unlawful intoxicants, if they last for the entire day. وَسُكْرٍ تَعَدَّى. So the unconsciousness means you fall unconscious. Right? You fall unconscious for the entire day, it nullifies your fasting. But if you only fall unconscious for part of the day, it doesn't. If you fall unconscious for part of the day, if you faint, it doesn't break your fasting. But if you faint for the entire day, then it breaks your fasting. Does that make sense? And then the other one was سُكْرٍ تَعَدَّى بِهِ. If you caused yourself to faint.
you told somebody like you do, like, you know, these kids are doing subhanAllah TikTok challenges where they do like a choking challenge or something like that, or things like that. If you're causing yourself to faint or become unconscious, it nullifies your fasting. Or you participated in, I don't know, you were using some kind of sleeping gas or something, or, you know, or medicine, and you cause yourself, you know, to fall unconscious, then at that point, it would nullify your fasting. Is that clear? And وسكن تعدى به نعم جميع النهار. Inshallah, I can look at that mas'ala, inshallah, and get some more clarity on it, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. He says here, let's see how many pages we got left. We got 3 pages. Let's see if we can finish tonight. Wallahu a'lam.
I have a question.
You have a question? You're going to interrupt us. We want to finish.
Okay.
Okay. No, ask your question. Bismillah.
Yeah. Maybe 2.
Maybe 2. Okay. Khair.
Okay, say about you force yourself to faint, right? How about you play? People play soccer. That's mean.
No, that's not excessive. That's the brother's asking if. Oh, somebody's using the TV remote. Okay, khair. No, if you play sports and you faint, that's not excessive. It's not something that normally causes fainting during the day.
No, because you know this fasting, right? Then you still this one you try to maybe break your fast. You play soccer. It's physical.
Yeah, I know, but athletes fast while they play their sports, and they're fine. You just have to make sure you're hydrated throughout the night. You know you have a good diet, but playing sports doesn't cause it doesn't really lead to.
You break fast? Do you commit sin for that? Or
No. Because it doesn't. It's not something that usually causes people to fall unconscious, right? Sports doesn't usually cause a person to fall unconscious, and if it does, there's no sin because it typically doesn't. But you just have to make sure you stay hydrated throughout the night, have a good meal, you know, make sure you're getting all your nutrition and all of that.
See to make up for like someone miss fast, better pay or to make up for them.
We're going to talk about that right now.
Okay.
Yeah, inshallah. So we're talking about missed fasting, right? He says, rahimahullah, the breaking of the fast in Ramadan are 4. The breaking of the fast are 4. He said, wajib, like for a woman who experiences hayd and postnatal bleeding. So a woman who experiences hayd, menses, or postnatal bleeding, she has to break her fast. She can't fast. It's not optional. It's a sin if she does. And this means she's doing it with the intention of worship. I mean, if she just doesn't eat, there's no ibadah, it's fine. But if she's intending, like, I'm going to continue fasting for the sake of reward, no, that doesn't apply. Number 2, permissible, like a traveler and a sick person. A traveler or a sick person, they can fast, and they can break their fast. They have the option. Your choice. What you want, whatever is best for you. Number 3, you know, this is interesting. Some people, they get married before Ramadan, and they go on their honeymoon, and they end up, and we just have, listen, first of all, you shouldn't be getting married before Ramadan by a week or 2. That isn't the smart thing to do. But if you ended up getting married for whatever reason and circumstance you're in, then, you know, if you want to have a honeymoon, just travel and you can, you know, break your fast for about a week roughly of that. If you travel to multiple places, then you can break your fast for multiple weeks. So that's just a fiqhi ruling in case that situation comes up. A person should know how to navigate it. Number 3, yeah.
You travel like that, you think the cost, that means you don't need to pay kaffarah, right?
Nope, you traveler. Traveler, if they break their fast, they don't pay no kaffarah. They just make it up. And you have till the following year to make it up.
No,
you have
you have a second cost while you travel.
You have a sick, what is it?
No, you second cost with your spouse, you know, while you're in travel during the month of Ramadan.
Okay.
You don't need to pay the kaffarah, right?
No kaffarah. Because it's permissible. You break your fast. So everything is halal. Everything is halal. So no kaffarah. Just qada. Only make up the qada, the fast. But if you make the intention to fast, can you break it? And the ruling would be, wallahu alam, I'm not absolutely sure, but I would assume is no. Because once you initiate a fard fasting, you can't break it. Does that make sense? You have the option to fast, but once you initiate the fasting, you don't break it for a fard. Does that make that clear? All right. Number 3, he says that which is neither wajib nor permissible, like insanity. No hukum applies. Number 4, haram, like the one who delays making up of Ramadan despite having the capability to do so until the time does not permit it. We always have this issue with people who miss fasting from the previous year. They wait till the last week of Ramadan. They're like, yeah, Sheikh, our week of fasting in Ramadan is in 3 days. I'm like, why do you wait so long? You know, and so those people, they're sinful by that delay. They're sinful by that delay for delaying Ramadan that late. And I always advise people to make up your fast in the winter. The best is to make it up immediately after Ramadan. You make up your fast and then you do the 6th of Shawwal. You make up your fast and you do the 6th of Shawwal. That is the best and most praiseworthy form. But if you don't have the discipline, do your 6th of Shawwal and then make up your Ramadan later. And you can do it in the winter time when the days are short, especially in Seattle. All you have to do is have a skip breakfast and have a late lunch and you fasted the day. Right? Iftar in the winters around 4 roughly, or late fall, early winters around 4 p.m. So that's regarding the ahkam of breaking your fast. And then he says on this next page, the types of breaking fast are 4. The things that make qada and fidya wajib, or the things that make qada and fidya are wajib. So there is a situation, if you miss fasting, you have to make it up and you have to pay a minor expiation. A minor expiation is called fidya. The way you pay these kafarat, pay them to relief organizations. Right? Some of the reputable relief organizations are Islamic Relief, Helping Hand, Relief and Development, Pure Hands. These are some well-recognized Muslim Aid. There's some organizations that are well-known and recognized in the U.S. and they do some really great work, mashallah. And so you give it to them, and if you go on their website, you can find an option for fidya, kaffarah, things like that. So you just check, and then they'll give you all the calculations and so on. So he says here, there's a situation where you have to make up the fast, which is called qada. Everybody should know this word. Qada, it means to make it up, to make up an ibadah. And fidya is an expiation. Breaking the fast due to the fear of harm for others. If you break your fast, in order to protect others, you have to make up your fast and pay kaffarah. Such as a lifeguard who goes in the water to save somebody from drowning. They have to make up their fast as well as pay kaffarah. Is that clear? Such as a mother who fears for the well-being of her child that she's breastfeeding in Ramadan. She wants to keep breastfeeding. She makes up her fast and pays kaffarah. Is that clear? And then number 2, breaking the fast and thereafter delaying to make up for it until the next Ramadan comes. You broke your fast, you didn't make it, Ramadan came down. 3 days from now, Ramadan is coming. You haven't made up your fast. You have to make up that fast and you have to pay kaffarah, an extra penalty for delaying it beyond a year. An extra penalty for delaying it beyond a year. And then he says number 3, those for which qada is compulsory but not the fidya, like the one who is unconscious. The one who is unconscious, the qada is wajib, they just have to make it up, but there's no fidya. They don't have to pay no fidya. Or the one who is ill and they break their fast. They just do qada and there's no fidya. And then number 3, those for which fidya is compulsory but not the qada. Like a very old man. So there's somebody unable to fast. They have a disability. So that person, they only pay fidya. They only pay fidya, which is about 509 grams of food, which is roughly about, I think, $10 roughly per day of fast. So 10 times 30, you're paying $300 in kaffarah if you can't fast the month of Ramadan. And you have a condition that you recover from. Only if you have a condition that isn't a recovery. That doesn't have a recovery. Diabetes, old age, subhanAllah, whatever other health condition. But if you had a procedure or something, or you're on medication or something of that sort, then you don't pay fidya. You just make up your fasting when the time comes, even if you didn't fast the whole month. Even if you didn't fast the whole month, you make it up. A brother came to me and asked, Sheikh, I get dialysis 2 days a week. What do I do? I said, those 2 days break your fast, because he has to have some food and water in his system before he goes and gets that done. So I said, yeah, just break your fast and make it up. No fidya on you. There's no requirement. You only pay fidya if you're unable to fast at all. You are completely out. You cannot fast for any reason. Diabetes is a very common one. Another brother came like, I have diabetes. What do I do? Just pay for fidya. $300, $10 per day, roughly $10 if you can double check if the number has changed. You pay your $300, you can pay it ahead for the entire month and khalas, you're done. That's all you do. You can send it to anywhere in the world. You can send it to any poor people around the world. Is that clear what the fidya is? Roughly $10, send it to any poor person, and that's sufficient, inshallah ta'ala. And then number 4, that which is neither wajib nor permissible, like the insane person whose insanity is not caused by transgression. And then inshallah, this next page we'll get into some of the things that nullify the fasting. He says the things which by reaching the stomach do not break the fast are 7. And then we'll talk, there's some miscellaneous issues that I want to talk about. If you have any questions, you can bring it up tomorrow. We already talked about, like eardrops, nose spray, nasal spray. We talked about rectal injection or insertion. I forgot what they call it. Suppository. All right, any type of suppository breaks the fasting. IV fluids break the fasting, but vaccines don't. But I would suggest, don't take any type of needle shot during the day of fasting. If it's nutritious, that's the rule. If an injection is supposed to provide you nutrition or hydration, it breaks your fasting. If it's for a medical reason, a medication, it doesn't break your fasting. Is that clear? If it's for a medical reason, it doesn't break your fasting. But it's for hydration and nutrition, it breaks your fasting. We said inhalers, asthma inhalers don't break your fasting. There are those who argue it does. But wallahu alam, it doesn't break your fasting. Asthma inhalers don't break your fasting. Eye drops do not break your fasting as well. Eye drops do not break your fasting, as the eye is in an opening in the body. So the eye drops do not break your fasting. Some have argued that it does, but it does not break your fasting. Dental cleaning does break your fasting. So if you got any type of dental cleaning done, don't do it during Ramadan. Don't do your dental cleaning during Ramadan. You can have a dental checkup, right, and an x-ray, which is fine and permissible, but no type of cleaning, washing of the teeth should be done. If you do, it breaks your fasting. And you can only do it if it's necessary. Once Ramadan begins, if your dental cleaning isn't urgent and immediately necessary, it is not permissible for you to do it. You wait till after Ramadan to get it done. You don't nullify your fasting for that reason. What other miscellaneous issues do come up? Well, toothpaste is permissible to use when you are fasting. Toothpaste is permissible. I want to talk about this tomorrow, but inshallah we'll just bring it up tonight. Toothpaste is permissible to use while you are fasting, as long as you don't use it excessively and you spit it out and you're mindful of it. But if you end up swallowing it, then it does break your fasting. It does break your fasting. I think that's all of the miscellaneous issues that I had on mind. There's some other stuff, inshallah, that will come up. Actually, he'll talk about the issue of like tasting food while you're fasting. Tasting food while you're fasting is permissible. Tasting food while you're fasting is permissible as long as you spit it out and rinse your mouth afterwards. It's permissible. There's no problem there, inshallah. Khalas, we'll conclude with that for the night, and we'll wrap up the chapter of fasting tomorrow. Khalas, jazakumullah khair wa barakallahu feekum wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.